The last lecture for week two, module two, is I'm going to just kind of talk a little bit about organizational management and organizational structures. The reason I do that is because it is a component of how you will manage within an organization, or how the organization will manage the activity or the function, if you will. So I'm going to walk you through four different types of structures that are generally prevalent within the industries. And then I'm going to walk you through an example of the organization that I had to build from the ground up at Emerson. And I'll put a disclaimer on that when I get to it. But I think hopefully you'll find it to be insightful. One, the magnitude of the problem. Okay, so when we talk about a supply chain management organization, SCMO, we're talking about either as a formal organization or a group of organizations. And this is, again, goes all the way back to the whole concept that there's not an organization per se. It's cross-functional, it's cross-firm, so therefore it is not an organization. It is a network. And so this network is what we're talking about, and this is exactly what this definition gets at, is that there are certainly formal organizations within that network, but the network itself is not a formal organization. Okay, it's very important you keep that in mind, because it's one of the things that's held back the idea of a supply chain executive, supply chain chief executive officer, or anything like that. So because it is so diversified and is so dispersed within so many companies, it's difficult to do. So the reporting structure generally looks like this. These are generally the four basic types of structures. One is functional, one is a hybrid matrix, one is a centralized matrix, and one is divisional. Now, I think you'll see we'll go through these pretty reasonably quickly, because I think obviously these two are fairly straightforward. If it's divisional, that's what it is. Reports into its own organization. If it's functional, then it's like transportation. So that would be centralized in that sense. These are the two where you kind of vary from all that. So let's take a look at this, and you see which one you're in. All right, so this is a centralized structure where you have everybody reporting into, you have centralized activity here, and it's reporting into a centralized supply chain management organization over here. Now, there's benefits and consequences, and I'm not going to read them to you. I would suggest that you read them, and you may agree or you may not agree. The biggest thing is these guys, the centralized organization tends to be, for most larger companies, too removed from the field. So they're somewhat removed from the customer base, or they're somewhat removed from what's happening elsewhere within the supply chain, because they're dealing at this from a far more analytical level. What they can do and do well is come up with standard processes. And as we've talked about before, standard process is the name of the game in terms of building collaborative communication partnerships. Is you have to have a process, and that standard process says when this happens, you do this, and you do it in this way. And then you have to audit the living daylights out of it to make sure that all the partners are complying with the various standards. So common standards is a good role of this. Execution is not a good role here, depending upon the breadth of the company. So if you have multiple business units, the business unit generally, if this is a structure, then they'll follow the core carrier list. They'll follow whatever else that may come out of there. But it's normally got some, it kind of creates some problems within the organization to do that, and it kind of creates some duplication of effort, if you will, and it leads to duplication of effort because somebody comes in and gets a better deal, and so this is kind of what happens. There's a lot of coordination here that goes on that would have to go on to make this effective. So the divisional reporting structure is really just that. The supply chain operation reports into the business unit reports into the chief manufacturing officer or the chief executive officer, whatever the case may be. Now, the consequences of this is that you have every division doing its own thing. So this is the negative side to that, is that you have one organization, but you have every division mapping out their own territory, their own way of doing things. And this, when those cases you do share a common carrier group, for example, this creates a lot of problems for them. So there's a lot of duplication of efforts here. And you also don't have best practice. So this misses best practice. You're only as good as who you have in these roles. And because everybody has someone in this role, whether they call it that or not, there's a chance that you're not sharing best practice. So this is the biggest, and you're not leveraging. So I mean, this is the biggest consequence of not doing that. So why the advantage to it is you stay close to your customer and your markets. So that's why you would do it that way, and you really would not be looking. You would be looking at kind of a cultural thing that this is how we do it, and we really don't care how you do it. So this is a hybrid reporting structure, which is a little more used to what I've seen and have found that works. So what you have over here is there are some very operational and unique needs, and let them do that. So this is like customization. I mean, for example, a lot of it's driven by localization. It's not probably going to be a good idea to have a centralized operation tell the Asian logistics manager how to do business in Asia, because this individual here is going to know, and these individuals are not. So this is an example of that. Is that those are unique situations where the planning has to be done regionally or locally. The order management does. Whatever customized purchasing has to be done that way in accordance with local rules and regulations. This is probably one of the reasons why you do that. You want to focus on leveraging where you can. If you do this, that's the hybrid side of it. So you want to bring people together to see if you can find synergies, see if you can get people to move towards synergies in common materials. So, for example, coming up with a list of core carriers is a valid approach to do in here, because, for example, if you go to Europe, you'll find almost every division is going to be using DHL and TNT. That's who they use. So that's likely going to be an example where you can leverage it, and no one's really going to have a heart attack if you decide to do that. From the strategic side, I mean, you're going to be looking at much the same thing. You're going to be looking at sourcing suppliers. You're going to be looking at commodities. You're going to be looking at network planning. Can we share warehouses? Can we share that process? What can we do? And I'm not going to go through that with you here. An example of how that has worked in the past for me. But I do want to give you the sense this is a hybrid. The hybrid model. So you have divisions, you have the SMO reporting into the division, and then you have the overall central outfit working through them. So division could be product oriented, could be geography or customer specific. So you may have a division that does only business with Walmart, and that division may have its own unique situations, but there could be some leverage over here, regional leverage. The matrix one is kind of interesting. The matrix one is more like what we had during my tenure at Emerson. So my disclaimer is that what I'm going to show you relative to Emerson was when I was at Emerson. Doesn't mean it does not reflect the current organization or the current thinking of Emerson. It did reflect the current thinking at the time that I was there. So when you look at this, what you have is you have functional groups that are corporate in nature, and they kind of set some of they do certain kinds of things. So for example, we had an air cargo group. We had a an ocean group. Um, we had those were basically the two groups. We had a compliance group, a trade compliance group that worked around the world because our shipments, a lot of our products were intercompany around the world. So it's important that when they went into the local markets that we were in compliance with all U.S. regulations, as well as any and all local regulations. So these then are reporting to a CEO who then has a division units reporting into them, and each one of these divisions have a supply chain manager. So this is what we call a quasi matrix, single business unit control. This is a controlled matrix where the division SCMOs all report into the centralized unit. Okay, so they report to the division unit, but then they also report into here. So they're dotted line to the business unit, and their reporting line is to corporate. This is, I'm not seeing this. I'm not seeing this one be successful. Here again, this is what we call a loosely harmonized matrix, where again, you have a chief supply chain officer and these corporate activities and functions doing things strategically on behalf and in concert. The dotted line then is into here, and the direct reporting relationship is back into the business units instead of the reverse way. Okay, so you see that the dotted line is this way instead of the dotted line being this way. So this is pretty much what we did right here. This loosely harmonized matrix. And I'm going to show you how that got built. So the key to all this, and this is from experience here, I can tell you, is when anytime you're working in matrix types of organizations, or really any type of organization, you have to have goal alignment. And goal alignment means that everyone that is affected by the action of a sister function has to be on the same page with them. So this gets back to what we talked about earlier about if you're going to make a change in what your shipping is going to be, you better let everybody know, because they may not feel that way, and it may not be really in the best interest of the company to do that. Maybe in the best interest of that division or that department, but it's not in the best interest of the company. So goal alignment, this is very difficult to do, and quite honestly, I found it to be not that prevalent. When it has been prevalent, and I have been in a situation like that, it is an amazing motivator. So people share information, they understand more about the trade-offs of why we do some of the things we do and what the advantage to it is. There are synergies that come through those types of organizations, and there's best practice that comes through that because you're knowledge sharing here. So you're sharing best practice because there's frequent and routine interaction between the people in the working groups to solve a common problem and or a challenge. So this is the advantage of managing workflows across subunits. And my suggestion to you is, depending upon the complexity, any of these can work. It just depends upon the strength. In many cases, it's going to depend on the strength of the person up here, or the chief operating officer, is where, I don't want to call it power, but the leadership strength of the people at the top as to how they want to manage it. There are some companies that will tell you, I want to manage the product, I don't give a hoot about the transportation. And then there are other division presidents who will say, I want to manage the whole thing. And the difference is, where's the goal alignment attached to that? If your goal alignment is the operating profit on my P&L is what my goal is, you're not going to give up anything. You're going to trust the people around you. You're not going to let corporate tell you what carrier you're going to use. You're going to use the carrier you want to use that allows you to attain your goal. So this is what I'm getting at. There's nothing wrong with either one of them, but it's the culture of the organization itself defines what the pros and cons are and where are the strengths and the weaknesses, the consequences and the benefits of doing what you can do, what you should be. If you're in a corporate environment, this is what you should be thinking you should be doing. You shouldn't be thinking about, oh, I'm going to go out to lunch with every carrier and go play golf. So that net doesn't go down well in divisions. Okay, so again, uh, when we're coordinating structures, which is we do in the matrix type organizations, we're talking about standards, processes, and systems, formal teams, liaison, and informal networks. A lot of these guys, a lot of these folks will work across. They'll call each other and work with each other. And what in the case that I was involved in, there was no structure to allow that to happen. And what we did was create that structure, which is what you're going to see now. So again, I want to again state categorically and unequivocally, what I'm showing you now is the vision that we had when I was there, which has been a while ago, but it is still relevant to this discussion. And if you get a call and say, hey, you want to come into you want to be the corporate logistics officer for this company, then my next question was, what's the structure of your company? Are you division oriented, or are you a matrix organization, or how are you set up? And if they say, oh, we're division oriented, then I'm probably going to say no thanks. But you may say okay. So again, the advantage here was we were looking to get competitive advantage by sharing and management of the information and best practice. So that was the entire goal. So when I was there, this was the organization that was there. We had a VP of materials. This position was me. We had a fleet which we managed ourselves called Emerson Transportation, quite large, as a matter of fact. We had our global transportation partners, these were just some of them. I had a gentleman in Asia. I had a gentleman in Europe, and I had a gentleman in the U.S. So what we had is the company at that time was broken into business units, and these are the business units. And so this was what it looked like when I first got there. Well, this was actually to be determined. This was me right there, process. So we had a lot of technology. We had a lot of tools that we could use, but every divisions weren't using them the same way. So we had a lot. We worked very closely with our technology guys at corporate to try to pull all this together. You see, we have a WMS system. We had a TMS system here. We had Descartes was a information management system that we use. This is where the pipeline visibility lay. Whoops, let's go back a little bit. So there were some tools that were out there for sure. We shared reverse auction. We'll talk about that. We talk about reverse auctions when we get to procurement. And we had a data warehouse. The data warehouse for transportation was our bank payment function. At that time, all U.S. bills were paid by the bank. There was some incentive for the divisions to do that, and so they did. That's your goal alignment. You get a rebate. They got rebates. Divisions got rebates. Okay, so this was a proposed organization. We were going to have an Emerson logistics leader who was tied in to finance and IT. We had Emerson Transportation, these very same partners out there. We were going to have a North American VP. We were going to have an Asian VP and a Europe and Middle East and Asia VP. And you can see here are the activities that we had that we were going to focus on. We were going to form councils around this on regional areas. And then then we did the same thing here in North America. We said the trucking leadership was going to be done by the tool group, facilities by industrial automation, ocean and air by network power, motors was going to do 3PLs, vendor managed inventory was the HVAC group, and the TMS um, system was by process. So this is kind of what we looked like. This is what we proposed. This is all we had. We only had these four blocks. That's all we had. But this was what the group looked like. So the organization chart looked like this. We had what we call a global logistics business leader. We had other groups called global logistics procurement leaders. So we adopted the same thing, and we called them GLBLs. So the GLBL was from each of the divisions, and then the designated VPs in each of the geographical regions. So that's exactly what you see here. Okay, that's exactly what you see here. And if it's open, we didn't know who that is. In North America, we didn't know who it was at that time. We were still talking about it. Okay, so this was a GLBL organization group. You notice it's tied to IT, and you notice it's tied to finance. And here's your 4PL sitting out there. Okay, so this is what they did. The GLBL group did this. They provided the leadership. They provided the authorization to move forward. They set the strategy. They prioritized the projects, not corporate. These guys prioritized the project, and they came up with the performance measurements. So we were sitting in a situation where we had no visibility. We had everybody shipping everywhere, everything. We were not sharing best practice. We were not leveraging. There were certainly questions about the expertise down in the plant levels at that point in time. So we didn't have what we needed to do what we needed. But what we did know for sure is that the materials were moving faster than the information was. And if you have that situation, then that may suggest that you might want to take the same kind of steps that we took here. Okay, so this is what we were looking at. We're looking at roughly 1.6 billion in cost. You get some idea of what the scope of this was and why we kind of attacked it the way we did. By the way, we didn't know that. This was the first thing I had to do was establish this. So that's what I did, with some help from some guys from the University of Michigan. We looked at just North America because we knew a lot more about North America than anywhere else. And if you look at that, we had this is a lineup. This is a lineup. Paid 2 million freight bills. We had many separate bill payment processes, all kinds of general ledger codes, 129 traffic managers. God, no, we didn't know how many logistics managers because mainly we didn't have that title. So we had no visibility on non-US transactions, and we had no visibility on freight not paid. So freight not paid means if it's delivered pricing, we don't know anything about it. We don't know how it was arrived at. We don't know how it's calculated. We have no backup for where that cost came from as a component of the purchase price. So we had a bunch of projects going on at the time. These are the 10 what we called the 10 fundamental projects that we identified and where we identified them. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about that in just a second. So we had already done quite a bit of work here. We already had roughly $28 million already identified just through things that we'd already done. And we're moving more towards, so we'd already done the work, done the analysis, and had already projected the savings and looked at other things as well too, as you can see. Each of these was quite an endeavor. So we looked at the opportunities, and this is what they kind of looked like. So here's what I'm going to say about this. The learning here is when you're building an organization like this, what we did is we came up with like 10 projects that covered all the geographies. That frankly was a mistake. It was beyond the ability of the corporation to execute. So my suggestion to you is really quite simple. Write down 10 and pick 3, and then do those 3 extremely well. If you can't do 3 extremely well, do 1 extremely well. Because if you pick the 1, then you're going to build the trust amongst not only your partners out here, because they're going to get the benefit and the recognition, not you. You don't want the recognition. You want them to have the recognition, but the divisions are going to see it reflected in their P&L, and that's how you move forward. So you move forward by building trust. You don't go out and say, we're from here from corporate, we're here to help, and we're going to take over, which was exactly what that looked like to the divisions. So what we should have done was focused on Asia Pacific inbound freight to the US. Now we had a need to do something here with LTL leverage, particularly going into Home Depot. So that would have been the second project, but this should have been the first project because at that time the global sourcing, or what we call low cost country sourcing, that's exactly what we called it, was low cost country sourcing, was a huge movement within the company at that time. So doing this, the idea of having ocean hubs and air hubs and multi-country freight consolidation was where we should have focused our attention. And from there, we could have branched out from there. We could have let the LTL side that could have progressed concurrently. We could have done that because we had some very excellent leadership within the divisions to manage that, and it was all based in St. Louis. So that was the way to go. That was frankly the way to go. So that's my learning to you is don't take on more than you can chew. And this was exactly what happened here. We just got spread way too thin, and there wasn't enough contribution coming back fast enough at the end of the day. So build a business case, build what that process is, and the process is here is don't do anything that the divisions don't want you to do. That's really the sum of this whole thing. But build a process, and you notice all the approval levels throughout this whole thing. So this is some of these go all the way up to the CEO office, what we call the office of the chief executive. This was quite a process, but it moved fast because they understood, and they wanted it to move. Senior management wanted it to move fast. So the office of the chief executive wanted it to move fast. So we got things done where we could. But having a process is extremely important to developing that standard. So we built the change ladder. That was the change ladder you just saw. We connected the vision to implementation. So we took the vision, we were going to do this, and we actually did this at some scale around the world. Okay. And we bridged the top down to bottom up. We went the other way. We said, okay, you tell us what we need to do and let's do it versus the other way around. And we did avoid this. We did avoid this technology spiral. We were able to standardize on a couple of 4PLs, and we standardized on some software as a result of that to give us global visibility, particularly on purchase orders, which was the Descartes solution. You don't have to have Descartes to do that, but that was a solution. Here are kind of the roles of what they did and what they were supposed to do and how we did this. So this is kind of this is a council. So if you think about that, and then in the council we had working groups. And here's the most important thing. The cost reduction flows directly to the bottom line of the division. It does not flow into corporate. Anything that flows into corporate gets rebated back out to the divisions. There have been dramatic savings. There were dramatic savings as a result of that. Very little to participate, but a little bit of ownership. And that was tough. That was tough. And we were able to, identify some people we didn't know about. And that was very beneficial. And some of those folks are still there. So we said only use it when it makes sense to use it. Respect the business unit. And Emerson, that was extremely important and remains important. The business unit autonomy is gospel. But draw on the collective knowledge. And everybody got along very, very well. The issue was never the personnel at the operating unit, at the supply chain unit. The issue was getting the support of the division presidents, and that flew in the face of at that time Emerson's general modus operandi. So it was kind of a new venture for them, and division presidents may have seen a little too much corporate engagement for their like. So we don't need to cover this. We've talked about that. I mean, we've talked about aligning business and logistics strategies. So I mean, this is pretty much what they did. So this is what we had. This is the last slide here. So we had a staked out a 5 to 7 year journey, $100 million target. We already had pretty much had 30 million already identified, not executed, but identified. And we did go through the 4PL work, and we came up with some control towers, some data control towers, which we talked about control towers before. We'll talk about them again. We did do some of these things in certain parts of the world, but it just kind of, quite honestly, it was one of multiple Emerson strategic initiatives. So Emerson was at that time was moving towards again this whole idea of best practice across the organization, which was a change from the previous senior management team. And so this was the timing was kind of bad for that. So it just kind of there were other changes that took place, and some of our sponsors left, and so it sort of fell apart at the end. Though there still is a very strong procurement activity within Emerson, um, and some of these things are still out there, but from what I understand. So the point is whether or not it was successful, but it's the idea of a hybrid matrix type organization and how you might want to look at structuring it. Okay, so that's it for module 2, and we will come back with module 3 next week. Bye for now.